Krissy, thank you for spending some time with me today. I am excited to chat with you.
I am very excited as well.
I was on your podcast, so thank you for having me on. So I had to return the favor.
Yeah, and of course, when you joined me, it was coming off the heels of really exciting times for you.
Yeah, it was. And you know what's funny is that time is coming around again, the ideal world. So are you going to be there this year?
I'm looking at the calendar. I'm like, summer always gets a little wild. It's motorcycle season full throttle.
Oh,
So that's always a little bit of a balance and a temptation for me.
yeah, yeah. If you're there, I definitely want to meet you in person. That would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Uh,
got to do the jumping jacks challenge if
I
we
know I
go.
saw that. That's going to be an interesting thing. But I've been following what you've been doing on LinkedIn and want to say first, great work covering the industry. And I want to start there. That seems like you're really digging deep into talking to people in the advocacy area of fitness. So let's talk a little bit about why this is an area of passion for you to really talk about and what's going on, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start on the why, right? Because I didn't grow up in this industry. I've always been a massive enthusiast of exercise and movement. And truly, I think I had a very early click over its potential and its power from the mental health perspective. I understand that now it's becoming almost more of a marketing narrative, whereas for me, it was that deep innate understanding a lot of the times that I needed to use it as a tool for not just body and mind. And my real love of fitness in general just came from growing up with a dad that was type 1 diabetic, which is autoimmune. He had it since he was 2. So, for people that aren't clear against the differentials, it's not something that could be prevented or cured. But we know when it comes to exercise, type 2 diabetes is something that is preventable on that chronic disease front. And I bring that up because I watched him struggle my entire life with a body that just never could operate in the capacity that many of us with our full health are gifted with. There were tons of obstacles of stroke, heart attack, kidney failure, and he lost his life at the age of 50, which we know is way too young. And so in my mind, I had a very fun and successful career in television, but started to have the itch to make a transition from traditional media into more of the digital space. And you start to really sit back and think, what could I put my voice behind that really resonates and lights me up inside? And this industry was really something that hit that for me. So this all kind of came to be, and All Things Fitness and Wellness was born through a client of mine, actually, when I was in television. So basically, my role involved doing a lot of branded sponsored content. And one of my clients is Canadian. He's American, but has business in Canada, Fitness World, which operates a bunch of gyms here in British Columbia. And his name's Chris Smith. He essentially pitched me on this idea. And I had been probably sitting with that curiosity factor of what was going to be my next move for about a year and a half. Sorry, I'm distracted by these fireworks that I
I
don't.
know how great is it when stuff pops up. Actually, that's
Right. I was just like,
great.
that is not
Wow, what's happening?
mind blowing information here. I was
Mind-blowing.
Yeah, but honestly, that's actually a great metaphor for exactly how I felt when this idea entered my sphere because there were fireworks inside. And so once we decided to build this out, it really became where's the niche and the focus that's going to take place through this platform. So doing podcasting, articles within the fitness industry as well. And the advocacy side was just so fascinating to me because here in Canada, for example, we have a tax line. It's tax line 33099. It's our medical expenses tax line. And essentially, the Fitness Industry Council of Canada here has been trying to advocate for Canadians to be able to use their gym memberships or personal training as a write-off. The wild part is that for us, the language actually exists in the legislation. It quite honestly just says ineligible instead of eligible. It is crossing out 2 letters. So riddle me that when we know statistically just how impactful these changes would be. There's been tons of studies in regards to fitness incentives and the fact that they actually work. And there have been multiple studies from different people that even when they stop, people's habits, if they've managed to build them, stick with them. And then we know in the States, which obviously I've had the chance to be on the ground in Capitol Hill, it's the FIT Act. So for Americans, it would be their HSAs or FSAs and being able to use those tax-free dollars for their fitness expenses, youth sports, so getting more children moving. And unfortunately, I just find that without a collective voice, these things don't move as well. We know that, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but at the same time, like sick care makes money. Sick people make money. I look at my dad again as a type 1 diabetic, all his supplies and things like that that he had to use. And I live in Canada where much of our healthcare is very covered. However, there were so many different facets of his medications or test strips that are not included, and it cost our family significant amount of money. And because he couldn't work because of his health toward the end, it also put us in a lot of financial trouble that I can remember even as a kid, them trying to navigate. So those are the advocacy pieces that we see happening in different pockets throughout the globe. And that's really why it hit for me, where when you work in television news, you don't always get to choose what you're putting your voice behind. And this allowed me to align myself very strongly with something that I do think could make a tremendous difference for a lot of people, because sadly, when you look at the stats, there is such a lack of movement. And I don't really know where we have this disconnect, because I feel like if people like you and I, we know the difference that it makes, and we know why it's a non-negotiable, because it is so life-changing. And I think if we can just get even a few more people to have that realization, the ripple effect's only going to continue to grow.
Most definitely. It's interesting when you're in a side where you see this seems obvious to me for
Yeah.
that. But I'm curious too. You were in Washington, D.C. recently
I was.
for a lot of my colleagues that I know very well. Tell me a little bit about the mood there, what was going on, and where we're at currently after that meeting.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've had the opportunity to go to 3 of the fly-ins with the Health and Fitness Association, which you may be familiar, of course, was
Yep.
formerly IRSA. And first of all, I would say the one that I just attended this past May was the largest they had. They had over 100 executives in attendance. It's neat because you see so many different sectors of the industry coming together. So there's some that are more on like the software side, and then others that have tons of big box gyms. There's franchisees, there's boutique fitness. And generally, they'll do a full day of info session ahead of time and bring some speakers in. Obviously, they talk about the physical inactivity crisis, obesity, military readiness in the United States, I know is a huge topic because there is a massive portion of individuals that don't even qualify due to their fitness levels to even try and enter that space. So they really work hard to ensure that before people are going into these meetings, because they're hitting the halls of Capitol Hill and speaking with people that represent them, because that's the big thing. You have to remember these politicians work for you. You're not inconveniencing their time when you're walking in that door. And I think that's just a big thing for people to remember. But it was really neat because what happened, they were doing for Physical Activity Month. I know that they had the Congressional Challenge. So the first morning for Capitol Hill, 6 a.m., and this is what I love about this industry so much. Never have I interviewed so many CEOs in suits in my life that actually show up and go get it bright and early. So
Yeah.
we showed up at Capitol Hill. They had an epic workout to start the day. And then the overall mood, I think sometimes there's a little bit of nerves if it's people's first times entering those meetings. I'm there with a camera capturing the moments. And so what I think is so neat is as the momentum builds throughout the day, the confidence level in the messaging that people are delivering to their senators or members of Congress really just gets stronger and stronger. And what I find most fascinating is almost every conversation that they have goes well. It's very hard to argue a negative for the Fit Act. You're like, oh, this is actually going to help people live healthier lives. It's going to improve their mental health. It's going to help more children connect with sports. But again, there's so many people that are lobbying. When you're doing those walks through Capitol Hill, there's people from all the industries, and the fitness industry, from my experience and my understanding, really didn't start getting collective and unified until post-COVID, where unfortunately, I think it really became quite obvious that if they didn't band together, we were going to see more businesses suffer, unfortunately, because it just wasn't seen as something that was essential. Somehow there were parts in the state that had strip clubs and liquor stores opened everywhere, but gyms were the bane of our existence.
Yeah, most definitely. I always thought that was so strange, but I'm sure you know, my colleague Michael Stack and I had a big podcast series about this frontline of fitness. Michael's great. He does great work on the front line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know he's at all those things, but I think it was a real wake up call because the industry has mostly functioned as a silo for the majority of its very short modernized existence. And I think people forget this formalization of this industry is literally a baby, tiny little baby right now. And how we grow that baby is really important. But we're certainly much better together than we are apart in a lot of different areas. You talked about there's a lot of groups coming to Capitol Hill and all that. Where do you see this going? What will move this further ahead? Obviously, more meetings like this, but what do you think will, as you're reporting on this, will create more of a seismic change over time?
Yeah, obviously, I'm joining you from Vancouver, Canada, so I speak from both sides because it's just interesting that we're both trying to accomplish the same thing on either side of the border, just in different ways. And I really think it's the grassroots conversations. It's one thing to show up in those meetings on that one day and make a big splash. And obviously, I think it helps through social channels such as LinkedIn, over 100 executives posting their experience. It sparks perhaps curiosity in some of their colleagues that may not have a full understanding or grasp as to why this is important. But I think it has to start on the local level. You need to start connecting with who you have in your community, inviting the mayor to the ribbon cutting, inviting them into your gym, and having the conversations there so that it does move up the needle. Because, again, as I say, I've gone 3 times in the last year and a half, and it gets to the point where those repeat visits, I think, are so beneficial because people are now starting to say, aha, these people aren't going to stop and they're going to keep coming. But at the same time, that's only 3 times out of 365. And there's very real big problems in the world. There's very real big problems. And we know we're heading into election season and all of that. So it's what's important to us isn't necessarily, because we live and breathe it every day, isn't something that's necessarily at the forefront and important to them. So I think just making sure that those conversations remain consistent, that you're knocking on those doors, is going to be imperative to actually see movement. Because the reality is, just because the industry's banded together, from my understanding, they've been trying to work on this for decades, basically, and it's just never made it over the fence line.
This is so true, by the way. I've been in it 23 years. It's pretty much been the same the entire time. And there's a lot of discussion. And Michael and I was talking about there's always all these white papers and all these statistics about how many people wouldn't die if people were more into fitness. And that message is not resonating with people. Now, we don't understand. My assessment is always that we need to better understand the human condition in order to have a better approach to this. Because we're fighting a very strong biological urge to conserve and do nothing. That doesn't.
And every distraction exists to help you get
right.
there.
And now we're facing this tidal wave of technology that is unrelenting and is being programmed to keep you looking at something all the time. So not only this biological urge, but this technological invention that is not going anywhere. It is literally not. And as you saw in Congress, there was recently a session not that long ago where parents and people came to meet with Congress, and there seemed to be this consensus about the dangers of social media, but I haven't heard anything since then.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be what happened.
Yes. And it makes me a little nervous because obviously from an industry side, Gen Z is a huge topic of conversation. They faced 2 recessions. They're watching their parents live out obesity and the repercussions of that. I think that's why there's something lit in them, that there's a bit more of a connection to fitness that we're seeing, and why they're this huge growing segment in the market. But then on the flip side, you keep hearing rumblings about Gen Alpha. And I know of a lot of the teaching community talking about how their jobs basically have become nightmares because these kids have grown up from the get-go on screens. And I know there's going to be such a study group and focus on them because I'm like, I feel like we're going to lose them. And point in case, I was at the Health and Fitness Association at URSA this past March, and I tried the Les Mills VR at the time. I'd never tried a VR fitness experience in my life. I was quite mind blown I was eye to eye with the instructor. It was crazy how quickly the world disappeared from me. But this gentleman walked by and he was like, oh, he's like, yeah, that's cool. He's like, have you tried the new Apple Vision Pro? I'm like, no, I haven't. And he's like, yeah, I got it. I haven't left my house in 2 weeks. This is literally the first time I've left my home. And he was like a fitness guy, but he wasn't like, he was just in the universe. And I'm like, ooh, if that's where we're headed, like it honestly reminds me of that movie Ready Player One. And I don't know if
Yeah,
you've
I've
looked or
watched it
watched
many
it.
times, many
Oh
times.
my gosh. I think it just predicted our future.
The
Terrifying.
oasis, right? They live
Yeah.
in the oasis, and all of society is crumbling around it. And I've always told people, I'm like, this is the future. And I
Right?
actually don't think there's any question about it. I think it is. And I think there's just technology is moving so much faster than our biology and our regulations around it. And there doesn't seem to be an appetite, honestly, to stop it, like on
I
a
know.
large scale. That's what worries me is there doesn't seem to be an appetite to do anything about it. So we're
No.
fighting an uphill battle, I think, continuously for that.
Yeah, it makes me grateful I spend so much time in nature. Go outside, people. Look at some trees.
Oh, I'm a massive gardener. I'm like obsessive gardener. Love gardening. And I always try, my whole concept is I always try to do things that don't don't provide a buffer between me and being outside in nature or my thoughts and different
Yeah.
things. But that is becoming harder and harder on a larger scale with our massive increase in technology for that. So I think it's a worthwhile cause for sure, but it's certainly maybe harder than it's ever been, which gives me a lot of encouragement that we have so many people in the business who still are working really hard to do that. Is the mood optimistic you feel with when you go and report on these things? You feel like people feel like something good is going to happen for change?
I feel like there's a healthy skepticism.
Mm,
I think that there is definitely a lot of positivity. I think the biggest thing that I see mood-wise is just the fact that this umbrella of everyone getting behind the same voice and message, and it's like public relations 101. If you can get people repeating the same thing together, that's an excellent thing. I think when you look at the fitness industry for what they've done to their consumer, we've watched that in real time. Because I grew up in the 90s in the era of diet culture. My goal as a woman was to be skinny, skinnier, and skinniest. And that's what fitness facilities were designed for me as a woman. And like now we know, and I feel welcomed as a strength trainer. And the narrative shifting even further to say, come in our doors for mental and social health. And I think we've done a really good job in doing a rebrand from the consumer perspective and more. You're seeing less and less New Year, New Me ads. You're seeing less and less Get Your Beach Body ads. So I'm like, that's going very well. And then I think just on a higher tier that's happening from an industry side of getting. So from the public relations side, I think people are getting in a better mood and mindset over having that same messaging be the goal. However, I think there's healthy skepticism in getting it over the finish line. Like even I had the opportunity to interview Mark Mastroff and ask him specifically last October. And of course, he's known as the godfather of fitness. And there was a lot of healthy skepticism as him to the point earlier that it's like they've been at this since the dawn of time kind of thing. And unfortunately, everyone seems to agree that it's a great idea, but I do think that there are more funded and profitable voices that are ahead in the arena that probably have greased the wheels perhaps a little bit more at this time. So I think it's a long game, but at the same time, the movement's growing. And I do think that the repercussions that we're seeing happen in real time from a health perspective, like it's pretty upsetting. Like I get that we're in the industry, but if you actually stop and take a look around and see how many people in just daily society have difficulties walking because of obesity from like through a grocery store, like simple tasks or getting older. And I know that we use it and see it so much in social media reels, but it's legitimate. Could you imagine not being able to pick up your grandchild or play with their toys? These are very real things that are happening to people that are preventable. And as a society, and as somebody that's grown up with somebody that never had their health, for some reason, it's like this cognitive dissonance where we don't seem to care about our health until we're sick and then we're terrified. And then people will do anything they could possibly do to reverse it. And sadly, the damage may be done by the time you get there.
Yeah, it's one of the more confounding things about human beings is this lack of being proactive about your own body and your health and your mental wellness. It's again, I think it goes back to just understanding who we are as human beings, our species, how we arrive at this point is, and there's lots of great work being done in that. But I also think like you had this exposure with your family. And for a lot of fitness professionals, I noticed they just don't have any exposure. And one of the, I think, maybe the more insidious things about being in the business is it's much if you grow up in a neighborhood and you never see anybody who looks different than you, ethnicity wise, whatever, you may feel a certain way about other people or just be naive. Fitness people are like that too. If you're just around really fit people all the time, you don't realize what's actually happening in Mississippi, Alabama, Washington State, wherever type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's imperative for people in the business to be exposed to different parts of the world in the United States. That's why conferences are great to see other people, travel to different places to get a better understanding of maybe everything's not like where I'm in Colorado, where it's definitely one of the fitter states, United
Yeah.
States.
Similar to
Don't,
me in Vancouver, because I
yeah.
came from St. Catharines, Ontario, that for a while we were we had the highest obesity rates per capita. And it was also synonymous with the most Tim Hortons per capita at the time, which is our donut
Okay.
shop.
I'm aware of it. Yeah, definitely where it's in more.
But yeah, like moving to Vancouver, it's such an active city and we have a lot of infrastructure to promote that, which is excellent. But unfortunately, as I say, you travel. When I go back home, it's nuts. I think about how car reliant I was. Now I go back, I'm like, of course I'll walk to the grocery store. It's too long. While when I lived there, of course I'll drive to the grocery store and circle the parking lot to ensure that I only have to go 2.5 steps to get to the car. Just funny mindsets.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. What do you think? Now, I'm interested in this about what do you think our public institutions or our transportation, whatever it may be, can do better to facilitate a more active lifestyle for our population?
I think it has to be hyper accessible. So one of the things actually that's happened in Vancouver, and I know is happening in a lot of major cities that's really effective, is we have bike share racks, which again, obviously our city lends itself to having a lot of protected bike lanes. There's an element of safety there. But what they recently did that I thought was fantastic was integrate some electric bicycles into the fleet. And to me, I'm like, great, you've just removed an added barrier for an individual that might say, cycling all the way there for that individual could seem like a monumental task, but adding that one element, I could have an assisted bicycle that may get me there, may actually be the thing that allows them to take the opportunity. I think if we're talking from a city perspective, making sure that the walkability score is good, having grocery stores that aren't too far and nearby within these communities, because then we'd be more apt to walk there. Every single time I have a visitor that comes from my hometown, I have to
Close it again.
genuinely, I know, I was like, fireworks. I have to genuinely think about how much I'm making them walk because I walk almost everywhere. I do have a vehicle. It's so I can go off-roading in the mountains. If I'm at home, I'm on foot. When I go to the gym, it's a 25-minute walk there, a 25-minute walk back. It helps me get my mindset straight and good to go. And I think just having more public awareness around elements like this is so important because at the end of the day, as I say, coming from a converse city that basically has nothing to motivate people to get moving, with nothing there, and like same with public transit, it was abhorrent there. Good luck if you're trying to get 5 minutes up the road, it'll take you 40. If it's terrible, people aren't going to use it.
Yeah.
And I pay a lot of taxes. Where are they going?
Yeah,
Because
true.
systems aren't working.
I know when I was growing up, that was like a big thing. It's like, oh, we're doing this because this helps with infrastructure and better roads and all those things. And I'm like, I'm not seeing it being put
Nope.
in action. So I
Right?
feel like yeah, where is this going? It's questioning that stuff. But I wanted
Yeah. And
to,
even for kids, just like to add on that note, but
yeah,
I feel like when I grew up, there
yeah,
was child of the 90s, there's a lot more
mhm,
independence. And so you were less nervous to utilize things like public transport or
yeah,
walk down the road or take the bike. Sadly, I think kids today, and we are doing them a disservice to a degree. We've all heard the term helicopter parent as well. And so they're actually not learning any of these tools in youth. And I just think that if there's less things that you're exposed to as a child, then generally you're not necessarily going to seek it out as an adult. So building foundations from a young age, I get safety needs to be top of mind, but sometimes I think we edge a little bit too far the other way. Like the world's scary, but it's not that scary. I think.
Yeah. I think it's like anything we do. We're not like a swing to the middle type of society. We're like one way and then swing all the way to the other. It's like when
Yeah.
I was growing up, same as you, 80s, 90s. Okay, that probably wasn't great to have this latchkey system where you were out for 10, 11 hours. No one knew where you were. Probably not
The
good.
advertisements, it's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
Right. I'm like, well, I wonder if my mom, did she know where I was? I was just out there riding
Yeah.
bikes all over creation. But then, like, to do nothing, okay, that's too much too. Like, it was actually when I moved from Blaine, Washington, which was very close to Vancouver.
Yes. Neighbors.
And used to go to Vancouver all the time, but it was a great place to be. But my daughter didn't really have a lot of access to play and do all this stuff, like, without it feeling like she had to go too far. We moved to Colorado here, and it's like a 1980s life for her here. She's just out there.
Okay.
They're riding bikes, roller skating, playing no phones. They're just having a great time. And I realized like this was the right move because a lot of kids aren't getting that anymore.
No.
They're just inside.
Yep. Yeah. And it's if you don't start then, and it's like that association that exercises play.
Yeah.
I love lifting weights. I still feel like it's play. To
Yeah.
me, that's just like the best time of my day being in there. But we're just not building those associations anymore
No.
for them. The shame.
Not at all. Speaking, I want to keep on the theme of kind of reporting your area that you've done so much. What can we do better to report more effective reporting about the industry and messaging about the industry from your point of view?
In which regard? Like in regards to different voices in the industry?
Yeah, just in general, like on a large scale, but also, that's also an interesting point of view. Like, how important is it for, how do I say this, to have the right voices putting together to lead? Because I think sometimes you can have voices, but they may not be the right voice.
No, that's fair enough. I think that truly the right voices are generally people that are authentic. And I know that word gets overutilized to the nth degree, to the point that it almost feels like it has no meaning. But truly, I feel like that's actually the gift of this industry. In my career previously, I worked over 10 years in major market media in television. And I've lost count how many individuals I've interviewed over the course of that time, often from executive level. And I can tell you, I interviewed a lot of people that had their PR person that fed them with what they were going to say. And it didn't necessarily align with the person I actually was talking to off the camera. And that happens a lot. My experience so far, and I can't speak to the breadth of this industry because it's massive, but it's honestly what has allowed me to continue in this role because I don't think I would have been able to if I was like, I don't know if I can swear, but if it was all BS.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if it was all bullshit, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
What has impressed me most is practically every individual that I have spoken with, and this would be from like the software side, people working in operations, like all levels, seem to genuinely have not a story like mine, but a story of their aha moment of why this industry mattered. And they also don't seem to have lost it. So I actually think from who should it be? Like we are the best facilitators of getting this message out because there is this incredible genuineness that I have encountered in this industry. Obviously, it's a very lucrative industry. There are people here to make a lot of money. But at the same time, I'm like, heck, they're creating products, they're creating spaces that ultimately do something for the greater good. And they seem to be really centered in that. When it comes to the reporting side, I think one of the biggest advantages that I'm seeing from companies that have a lot of data are the incredible reports that they're able to give us of a real-time picture of what's actually happening in facilities, who's using them, what the demographics are, what they want. I think if more are willing to continue to share, that's excellent news for us all. Because at the end of the day, to your point, when everyone's heading to the hill and they do share these statistics, having more and more factual statistics of exactly what the temperature check is does hold a lot of weight in these conversations that are happening at the forefront. So I don't mean to blanket and be like, everyone in the industry is wonderful to share this news, but I'm just saying in my experience, I have actually been shocked with how I'm not a big fan of like suits, so to speak. Like I like that was the part of the TV world where I was like, get me out. Don't these people like every human is weird. I love weirdness. That's my goal is to find that in people. And like how people ride the line in this industry because they all have that sense of play still because they get it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think you are perfectly situated to talk about that because that whole aspect of like PR person props up to say a certain thing, and then you meet a different person. I think that's one of the things that's always very hard to deal with is not knowing what you're getting. And I think a
Yes.
lot of fitness people really care. Honestly, they really care. But I think one thing in my venture to create a formalized mentorship program, what I'm working with in our team doing that is everyone cares, but it's very difficult to find people who want to push that initiative. Because in our business, everyone's super busy because it's a hard business to stay in. Even though it is lucrative, man, you got to work hard to stay in it for a really long time. It's unforgiving. It's really difficult to be in for that. There's certainly a huge thread of kindness. I wanted to ask you, in interviewing people, do you spend time on interviewing, let's say, fitness influencers, celebrities, and like, what do you think their role is in pushing forward the essential nature of our business?
Oh, they have all the weight and all the power for relating to the fitness consumer. We know when you look at the fitness influencer, number one, I understand anytime anybody hears influencer, they're like, ugh, influencer. Like there's this general malaise that gets over people. But I'm like, you got to hand it to those that have built these really successful platforms. You have to feed the machine every day. It's a lot of work that goes in behind. And if you're not playing in the arena, you don't exist. So it is a constant. So I just want to give props to those that are in that space because I think we discount the fact that it is actually work. And those that understand social media probably have a better appreciation for what's involved. That being said, it's like with great power comes this great responsibility. And unfortunately, there can be a lot of narratives that people buy into or products they're sold or things like that. Because, like, when influencers have a genuine organic community, people eat up everything that they say as truth. And so I think that it's recognizing the power that some of these individuals have. And I think from a fitness business perspective, aligning with influencers in their gym community and creating space for them. Some of my favorite gyms that I've toured, and especially like I used to compete. And so you want to track your progress and things like that, are the ones that actually have social media stations within them. Because at the end of the day, and we don't even need to get into the discussion about filming in gyms because controversy. But that being said, how smart for these operators because then you have people within your gym walls that are amplifying the message. So I think that there's opportunity for businesses to actually connect with these influencers in their community. But at the same time, when you look at influencers in general, it creates a difficulty for the industry because they have to cut through a lot of powerful noise. There are so many messages in any which direction. If you go a hashtag fitness, hashtag FitFam, within a 5-minute span, you could learn 50,000 different things that you should be doing for your body. And how are you supposed to know what is fact or fiction? And again, to the point that I said earlier about growing up with these ideals that you're supposed to live in, we also see tons of manipulated photographs. Like it's distorting a lot of individuals' idea of what is reality and what is not in regards to body imagery. So I guess a little bit of a big spin in that question, but or in my answer there, but I'm just like, the influencer world is massive. So yes, they hold a lot of weight. Like you look at, I think it's Planet Fitness that have partnered with Megan Thee Stallion. Super effective for their Gen Z audience, I think. Like she already had established herself in that fitness space. Goodness knows what they paid for that endorsement, but I'm like, smart alignment in my eyes.
Yeah, and I've been in some committee meetings in the past and where I think our old school fitness guard, they look down on the fitness influencer. And I always make it clear in the meetings, I interview influencers and people because I want to know. I'm about seeking out information, not saying things and not knowing. And
Yeah.
one of the greatest things I learned from all my interviews, and I continue to do with influencers, is they actually want to be part of this industry, but they don't feel it from the quote unquote very highly credentialed people, honestly, like people like myself. They don't feel that. And they just want to be part of it. Or a lot of them actually accidentally became famous by putting out
Yes.
one or two videos. They never intended to be in the industry the way they are. And so they're actually very self-conscious about what they're doing. And so we need to help them. And I think all coming together is really important, but we need to stop this kind of like slandering fitness
Yes.
influencers so much. We don't know other people's stories. And you don't know that unless you sit down with someone and you talk to them. I think
And
that's
if
good reporting to me.
if you are a fitness influencer, it means that you show up many times a week to celebrate exactly what we believe in and provide. And so I absolutely agree with you. Like, it's how I started there, being like, people hear influencer and roll their eyes, but I'm like, they are a massive part of the equation. Can you imagine if influencers were actually the ones that were amplifying the advocacy messages?
Exactly. That's
Like,
what I mean. That's what
yeah,
I mean. Those people like at Capitol Hill, there should be some fitness influencers there. They know they may not necessarily need to be taking the lead, but the fact that they're there shows unification as
yes,
well there. We got to stop. We have to include those folks. And also, we can't also just look as a fitness influencer as someone who has a lot of subscribers. We only look at it that way and that reach. But there's plenty of influencers in our business that are not gigantic on social media. We need to pump them up too.
yeah, I agree. Because at the end of the day, they are the real people that are
Yeah.
walking the doors. And we know just as well, to your point, like when it comes to influencer, really, that's standing for being a person of influence.
Um,
When anybody in your social circle has embarked on a journey toward a healthier lifestyle, generally that has caused a ripple effect amongst the group. Like that is a little piece of influence right there. And I think sometimes maybe we forget the power and the value of what that actually has.
I think so. Yeah. It's all back to this advocacy. If we're going to advocate, we got to advocate for the entire industry. And sure, we have to have some parameters around what is misinformation and what, we want to do be safe. We want to make sure people are getting good information, but we just can't exclude this group. Like they're not doing anything. Actually, they're doing something that a lot of us in the business don't do very well, which is market ourselves.
Right?
So,
Have Gen Z walk in there so they can speak to their member of Congress and say, I've grown up in an era of getting through 2 recessions, and then I
yeah,
missed a ton of school because of COVID, and that impacted my mental health. And for a lot of them, they're like the walls of the gym when they're finally able to connect, or through however they celebrate movement, or what's helped them move through the experience. Have them delivering the message, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that have lived it in this wild way and then shared their journey publicly,
yeah.
ultimately getting more people to do it.
Honestly, it reminds me of a very personal story for me. My daughter's almost 13 and we adopted her when she was a month old. And you have to go through parenting classes and adoption classes. And one of the most powerful things they did, Catholic Charities is the organization who we went through, they always brought in speakers. And they didn't just bring in adults who had been adopted. They brought in little infants all the way through senior citizens to look at this is what it's like adoption, all the way from little babies all the way through adults who have now become senior citizens, and to tell their story or be there. So you have the full picture. Why would we exclude the experience of a 16-year-old adoptee from someone
Yeah.
who is 50? It's the same concept. Give everyone the full spectrum to let them make their decisions about it.
Oh, and their stories are so good. I've covered a couple of and I'm sure I know for fact there's facilities all over for individuals that perhaps have had issues with their heart. And like here, it's called Happy Hearts, and they go. And these are people that have never exercised. Some of them maybe a little bit dabbled, but didn't necessarily have structure around it. And I've gone to their morning workouts, and the testimonials of their experience after and the powerful stories that they have I have such a soft spot for the elderly because I'm like, they're the most wisest people that roam the planet. And
For
for
sure.
some reason in North America, we discount individuals of age because we're idiots. But like, you actually sit down and have a conversation, it's the most enriching, powerful stories. And at the end of the day, what member of Congress can look into that sweet 80-year-old's face that's crushing it at the gym and be like, no, we're not going to endorse the Fit Act?
It's one of the weird things about our society. We don't have a huge amount of appreciation for our senior citizens. In other countries, especially in Asian countries, there's this tremendous reverence for the wisdom. And that's what I always try to tell really young people in their 20s. You can't have a tremendous amount of wisdom because you just haven't lived that long. You haven't had
Yes.
enough experiences to gain that wisdom. It's okay that you don't have that. You're not supposed to. like,
I
like
know,
you
well, they're like,
know?
there's something missing from my toolkit because social media told me I'm supposed to have it all. You're like, you're good.
I'm supposed to know all these things because I have the internet and stuff. Like, yeah, sometimes you just got to have the long game of being alive to know.
Yes.
We always think about you're generally a very different person throughout the decades as you change and grow. You look back sometimes you're very cringy about the things you used to do. Yikes. Like,
That's
that's just
growth,
time.
though. And the minute you have it figured out, life goes record scratch, and generally you'll just throw a plot twist your way
Yeah.
anyways.
No, definitely a plot twist going there. So I wanted to, on this last part here, learn a little bit about what is the future of all things fitness and wellness and where this is going for you.
Yeah, honestly, the first little while was really learning a lot about this industry. The thing for me is I came from kind of the height of my career where I could go into work every day when I was in television media and I knew exactly what I was doing and how it would look like. I could do it with my eyes closed. And so it's been a really enriching experience to dive headfirst into something and suck when you start out, which is what you hope for when you're starting anything. I spent a lot of time being like, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to look. And I'm a huge creative. I love getting into flow. I love the process, but it was just throwing different things against the wall and seeing what stuck. Relationship building was a really big part of that first year as well, because I'm the Canadian across the border coming in with a lot of enthusiasm, but at the same time, I didn't necessarily have the personal connections that other people that had been in the industry longer. So that was the initial evolution. And since then, I've been growing up the podcast, and essentially the goal is to continue building these branches. So I feel now that a little tree has sprouted, it's doing sturdy as the winds blow, but I want to start building out these different facets and branches. So it was last fall. We ended up launching with ABC Fitness, the financial fitness forecast. So that more takes a granular panel look at the financial health of the industry, the different innovations. Obviously, there's always a lot of fascinating news that's taking place in the stock market. So bringing in those experts and having those conversations quarterly. I'm just starting a marketing specific one as well. And again, just doing it in this quarterly panel format. We're working on one as well for retention. So it's like these little branches, because the thing that I love so much is I came from the world where you would have this incredible, brilliant mind, this wonderful expert with this wisdom and experience. And I would put a microphone in their face and say, all right, tell me a little bit about it. And they would speak for 2 minutes. And then I would be like, cool, I have to tell what they said in 15 seconds. And so I think just being a platform that continues to amplify these different branches with these experts and really drive those messages home from them, because we have all this incredible knowledge base. And what I'm noticing is everyone's trying to crack the same question. You hear it constantly. How do we get that other 80%? There's like the advocacy side, and then we've been talking to the same 20% of people for so long. And so I think the more and more voices that we have, or platforms that are amplifying these very intelligent individuals and their experiences and being this hive mind. And one of the things that impresses me endlessly, and I know that you know this as well, people are so willing to share. Like, people are so willing to give their knowledge in this knowledge exchange. So being a space that's going to allow more of that is the goal. And then I love creating video. I love editing. It's like putting a little puzzle together. So I've been going out to a lot of industry events, and I'd like to expand my calendar on that. So I've been creating some partnerships with different individuals in the industry. So I actually I'm doing proper media partnerships now. And my goal is always, if you've seen me at URSA or Health and Fitness Association, I'm generally in bright colors because that's just who I am, with my flat brim hat and my J's on. I'm not dressed up there in a suit, and I feel like I'm that little essence of what I see in the industry that I love so much. Obviously, I understand that people have to be professional and serious to a degree, but this is an industry about play, activity, and movement. So being a platform that celebrates the heart and soul of that is really at the core of what I do. And so as long as I'm continuing to have fun with it, I'm going to keep going. If I'm not having fun, then what's the point?
It looks like you're having a lot of fun, and I love seeing all the different media that you're creating. And if I don't see you at Idea World this summer, hopefully at another event.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate you tremendously, Krissy. Thank you for giving me some of your time. And please let everyone know other ways that they can connect with you outside of this context here.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Krissy Vann. I'm really active there. You can follow us at All Things Fitness and Wellness on LinkedIn and Instagram, or you can travel to atfw.ca. There's a contact page there. It goes right to me. So happy to connect. Love having conversations. I was the kid that always got moved in class for talking too much. I was happy I translated it into a career.
That's a great way to end it. That's pretty awesome. Thank you so much, Krissy. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Darian.